That was the worst salad I've ever had in my life.
I'm sick and tired of everybody complaining.
I think I'm just gonna leave. Did you have a manager I could talk to?
Yeah, of course. Just give me 1 second.
Good.
See what I did there? Yeah, you may have noticed people complain about everything. But according to surveys, we carve most about the weather, politics, work, and relationships. But it doesn't end there. Just look online and everything and everybody seems to be fair game when it comes to expressing our discontent and negativity. So much so that we have a whole culture of complaint. The internet simply makes it easier to complain and to a wider audience, and that's contagious. But before we shake our heads in disdain, let's recognize each of us is part of that.
Complaining's like bad breath. You notice it when it comes out of somebody else's mouth, but not so much when it comes out of your own.
Will Bowen was pastoring a church in Kansas City, Missouri, when he challenged his congregation to go 21 consecutive days without complaining a single time.
And so we handed out 250 of these bracelets, and I told everybody, listen, I'm going to continue this series on prosperity, but we're going to work together and all stop complaining now. So you put the bracelet on your wrist. Every time you catch yourself complaining, you take it off one wrist and you move it to the other wrist. It's a mindfulness exercise. The average person complains 15 to 30 times a day and has no awareness they're doing it.
That exercise was so successful, it led to a best-selling book and the Complaint-Free World Challenge, in which people all over the globe do the bracelet thing. So, what about you? Could you go 3 weeks without a single complaint? I think we all know that we're prone to complain and we understand instinctively it's not a good thing. But we seldom take the time to figure out why it's a sin and such a big deal to God. And yet the Bible is very clear about complaining's destructive power. But before we go there, let's make sure we understand what complaining is and is not. Simply put, a complaint is when we express dissatisfaction or annoyance in a negative way. It usually has undertones of unfairness and entitlement, such as when we say, "This isn't right," or "This shouldn't be happening to me." And almost always, a complaint comes when we're talking to somebody who can't solve the problem or who isn't directly involved. So, for example, when most people are unhappy with their boss, they complain to their spouse. When they're unhappy with their spouse, they talk to their friends. They speak to anyone and everyone except the one person who can fix the situation. Among psychologists, this unhelpful behavior is called triangulation, and it guarantees that until you speak to the person who can remedy the problem, your unhappiness will persist, and it'll be made worse by constant whining that increases our stress level. And attitude makes all the difference. Let's say you go to a hotel and you get a great room, but there's a loud generator nearby and it keeps you awake all night. You don't complain to your spouse or phone a friend to vent your spleen, but go instead to the manager. Stating the problem and asking for another room is not complaining, unless you resort to name-calling and abuse. Then you are complaining, even if you're dealing with the person who can solve your dilemma. So let's make sure we've got this. There's absolutely nothing wrong with stating the facts of a problem. In fact, it's necessary to address problems, but always in a calm and considerate way. God does not expect us to be pushovers, but He does expect us to be loving. And to understand why complaining is such a stench in His nostrils, All we have to do is look at some biblical examples. The very first complaint in the Bible comes from the story of Adam and Eve. Eve tries the forbidden fruit, then gives some to Adam, who blames everybody but himself. He even blames God. He says in Genesis 3, "It was the woman you gave me who gave me the fruit, and I ate it." Once the people of Israel are in the wilderness after God frees them from Egyptian slavery, what do? They complain incessantly, even when God provides water and food in the form of quail and manna. "Oh, for some meat," they exclaim. "We remember the fish we used to eat for free in Egypt, and all the cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic we wanted. But now all we ever see is this manna." We're told, Moses heard all the families standing in the doorways of their tents whining, and the Lord became extremely angry. Now watch this. Moses said to the Lord, "Why are you treating me so harshly? What did I do to deserve the burden of all these people? Did I give birth to them? Did I bring them into the world? Why did you tell me to carry them in my arms? And where am I supposed to get meat for all these people? They keep whining to me, but the load is too heavy. If this is how you intend to treat me, just go ahead and kill me. Do me a favor and spare me this misery." Notice that sense of unfairness and entitlement we talked about, and how complaint is contagious. And those are just a few examples. In the New Testament, the situation is much the same. In Matthew 20, Jesus warns against complaining by talking about workers in a vineyard whinging about their wages. The religious leaders of the day complain constantly about Jesus and his disciples eating and drinking with sinners. And when Jesus goes to the home of his friends Mary and Martha, Martha complains about Mary leaving her with all the work so she can spend time with him. Interestingly, the first century Greek word translated complainer literally means someone who is discontented with their life. And that gets to the heart of why complaining is such an insult to God. As Jesus said, the Father is the one who loves us, provides for us, and watches over us. So when we complain, we're actually complaining about him and his actions or inaction. Jesus calls us to trust God, ask him for what we need, and have faith that he'll come through. He tells us to be grateful for all we have and to be confident that God will take care of us because even the hairs of our head are numbered. But complaining betrays an attitude of pride and entitlement, a lack of trust, and an absence of gratitude. Nothing about whining is compatible with the fruits of the Spirit we're to have in our lives. Things like love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. No wonder God finds carping so offensive. Now, before we look at what to do about complaining, it might be helpful to look at why we complain in the first place. And not surprisingly, the Bible and science agree on the main reasons. There are 5 things that fuel complaining, and they can be summed up with the acronym GRIPE. The first is getting attention. Some people complain because they can't think of a more positive way to get the acceptance, approval, and inclusion they crave. So if everybody else in the group is complaining, they join right in. The R stands for those who remove responsibility. When they fail or make a mistake, they deflect responsibility just like Adam did and blame others or circumstances, hoping everybody else will see them as a victim. The I is for inspire envy. because some people use complaining as a way to make themselves look good. They point out a negative about somebody else to highlight that they themselves don't have that fault and are superior. The P is for power. They complain about others to elevate themselves and make people side with them when push comes to shove. And the E refers to those who excuse their poor performance. Unlike those who complain to justify their own inaction, these complainers moan about circumstances after the fact to explain away their lack of success. Now look at that list. Everything on it is me-centered and designed to feed our own insecurity and need for approval. None of it honors God or blesses those around us. In contrast, Paul writes, "Do everything without complaining and arguing, so no one can criticize you. Live clean, innocent lives as children of God, shining like bright lights in a world full of crooked and perverse people. Hold firmly to the word of life." Notice he says, do all things without complaining and arguing, not just the things that suit you. It's a tall order for all of us, but there are some things we can do to make it easier to put the kibosh on complaint. The good news is that although griping may be habit-forming, so is avoiding the tendency to complain. And that's because the brain is designed to be efficient. So whenever we have a reoccurring thought or emotion, the nerve cells create a bridge among themselves to pass along the information faster. That's why some thought patterns are so ingrained. Not only that, a Stanford University study shows that complaining shrinks the hippocampus, a part of the brain responsible for problem-solving and thinking skills. It also releases the stress hormone cortisol, and too much of that leads to high blood pressure, high blood sugar, and more vulnerability to disease like diabetes and heart trouble. So it's in our best interest to train ourselves into avoiding chronic complaint. Studies say the best medicine for complaining is gratitude. Simply focusing on all your blessings lowers damaging cortisol by 23% and also reduces blood pressure and blood sugar. So the Bible knows what it's talking about when it says, never stop praying. Be thankful in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you who belong to Christ Jesus. The spiritual benefits come with physical ones. But it's not just about us. As we've already seen, people tend to mirror the attitudes and behavior of the people around them, so we have to be careful with our example. After all, in a world full of griping and whining, who would want to be part of a faith where people are habitually dissatisfied and negative? Instead, we have to do the right thing, the right way, for the right reasons. So it's important to realize that a complaining spirit leads to fighting and quarreling, because complaints come from unfulfilled desires, and unfulfilled desires lead to envy and strife. Remember James 4, what's causing the quarrels and fights among you? Don't they come from the evil desires at war within you? You want what you don't have. Yet you don't have what you want because you don't ask God for it. No wonder the apostle goes on to say, don't grumble about each other, brothers and sisters, or you will be judged, because the judge is standing at the door. Complaining has huge consequences because it doubts God's willingness to take care of us, betrays ingratitude, and damages our relationships with others. So, what's the antidote? Well, if the root problem really is unfulfilled desires, start with prayer. As Paul says in Philippians 4, tell God what you need and thank Him for all He's done. Then you'll experience God's peace, which goes beyond anything we can understand. His peace will guard your hearts and minds as you live in Christ Jesus. And one final thing, fix your thoughts on what is true, honorable, right, pure, lovely, and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. Then the God of peace will be with you. If you're looking for a formula, there it is: prayer, appreciation, and positivity. Just think about all the good we could do if we took all the time and energy we normally spend complaining and rechanneled it into serving God and others. That too would be contagious. So when Paul says in Romans 12, "Don't be conformed to the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think," he could have been referring to the culture of complaint, because it's draining. It keeps you where you are, and it brings down everybody around you. You really want to stand out in this world? Then stop complaining. As Paul says in Philippians, that will make us bright lights in a dark world. And who doesn't need more positive people in their life? We can be that when people see that. But we have to make a choice. We can either embrace grousing or gratitude, carping or contentment, belly aching or true belief. If we do quash the complaining in our lives, God will be glorified and those around us will be encouraged. And we will reap many, many blessings we don't even deserve. But who's complaining?